There we go. Hey, welcome everybody. Really appreciate y'all coming out today. I am Jason Hurst, and this is,
Hey everybody, Brian Poole.
and we're with the Customer Incident Response, AWS Customer Incident Response team. What we're going to talk about today is Cloud Incident Response Essentials, planning ahead. So a lot of times when we look at incident response, we're always talking about containment. We're always talking about eradication, talking about recovery. Well, what we want to talk about today is before all those things happen, what are a lot of things you can do even before that in order to make your response that much faster, swifter, and be able to enable your organization in case you get to those points to react that much faster and have things in place. So the agenda we're going to talk about our team, how you can reach out to us in case you need a little bit of extra help. We're going to do a quick demo of a potential data destruction attack. Then we're going to look at some logging, some preparation, some analysis, really, really cool things that we're going to cover with y'all throughout today. So our team, as I mentioned, we are the AWS customer incident response team. What our team is if you're having a bad day, something's going on, you're doing your incident response, your security processes, and with AWS services, it just happens to get out of hand. It just gets beyond your ability. There's just things going on. Well, what can happen is you can reach out to AWS support, open up a support ticket, and then if needed, that support team will go ahead and escalate to our team, the CIRT, and we'll be an extra pair of hands, extra pair of eyes to help you out. So our team consists of solutions architects and security consultants that specialize in, imagine that, security. We're here to assist and advise and help guide you through in case there's services you're unaware of, different configurations, and also just help you recover from the event. So that way both of us can move beyond that event and have a productive relationship together moving forward. So why are we here? Well, there's lots of reasons that we're here. One of the biggest reasons is customers face challenges 24/7. Security, the internet, it's wild, wild west. It's always going to be a bad place. If the internet was a good place, I wouldn't have a job, and I'd honestly be okay with that. Unfortunately, though, the internet is a very, very scary place. So that's why we're here, is to make sure our customers have that lifeline, have that extra reach out just in case something happens that you need either some guidance, some recommendations, some mentorship, or maybe we can just point you to existing resources in Amazon that you might not have been aware of. So that way, in the future, you can handle those events on your own without having to reach out to us. Customers are also looking for the right AWS skill sets and knowledge. A lot of times, if you're beginning your cloud journey, this whole scary thing that's the cloud, I moved from on-premise servers, I'm moving from on-premise devices, I'm moving from my home laptop, and I'm moving into this cloud thing. Well, what we want to be able to do is enable our customers to accelerate their journey, but also do it securely. Security is number one for Amazon and number one for AWS. So we really want to focus that. And as you start using our services, as you're configuring them, as you're using your production payloads, creating your applications and your business environment within the cloud, we want to make sure that it's as secure as possible, just because the internet is a scary place. And finally, we want to share our knowledge. At the end of the day, our team just consists of both volunteers and full-time personnel. We have Amazonians across the organization that are just inspired by our customers. We really want to delight you and work backwards from the issues that you're seeing, build those into our products and our open source projects, which we're going to talk about today as well, in order to try and enable our customers with adopting our services, again, in the most secure way possible, but also making it easy for you so that way you don't have to worry about security as much as you would otherwise. So without further ado, I'm going to go and jump into a case study real quick. It's going to be a really simple case study. It's going to cover exposed access keys, and just want to kind of demonstrate one of the things that our team has seen, that's why we harp so much on please protect your access keys. Access keys, I love them. I would prefer everyone use roles with their IAM profiles, but access keys do have their place. And this is one of those situations where we discovered that it's not such a good thing. So my handy dandy management console. We sign into our management console. I'm just a simple developer, and I'm going to go ahead and plug in and look at S3. You can see I have a couple buckets, some objects. We have some data in here, and we have some things going on. Unfortunately, we recently hired a new developer. So Oliver, he's starting off in a US East 1 region, set up some access keys last night, and based on those access keys, uploaded them to GitHub into a public repository. Well, the problem with GitHub as a public repository means anyone on the internet, anyone in the world that's scanning, enumerating the internet for public things, found his access keys. So now we have this user from Ukraine, and this user is like, you know what? I'm going to do AWS configure. And based on these things, I now have these GitHub key and secret key that I'm going to go ahead and I'm now Oliver. I'm going to go and set up for my default region. I'm going to do defaults. Super cool, right? Well, let's go ahead and see what I can do. Can I do AWS IAM create user? And this is why I have notes. So, and what we'll notice, this is a good thing. When we set up our developer, we automatically looked at least privilege. We know it's a new developer. We know they're working with certain services. We didn't want to give them everything. We don't want to give them admin role. We don't want to give them overprivileged permissions. So I can see right here that Oliver is not allowed to create user. Cool. So we already limited one backdoor opportunity for an actor to go ahead and create new users, create new access keys, things like that. Well, are they able to do anything with IAM? Let's go ahead and try and see what existing users may already be there. No, I did that right. Oh, I still have create user. Yep. So when we look at this, awesome. Oliver's access key can't do anything with IAM. So now at the actor that I am, malicious actor, I'm like, okay, I can't do anything with IAM. I can't create new users. Well, what can I access? Let's try S3. S3 is a common service that everyone uses, right? All right, I can see S3, and I see there are a lot of really, really cool buckets in this account. Well, what do I want to do with these buckets? I could copy them off. I could do an S3 sync for each of the buckets. I can go ahead and recursively look and see what's in these buckets. For example, if I want to ls and I want to go ahead and look at my Reinforce TDR205 bucket, just to kind of see what objects might be present. Hey, there's a Git project in there. Maybe it's the Git project where the credentials were exported accidentally or on purpose, who knows. So again, now I'm just enumerating, I'm walking through the account. Nothing nefarious so far, right? All I'm doing is just looking at your stuff. Unless it's proprietary data, trade secrets, files, everything's clear text so far. Nothing's encrypted. I'm going across the TLS channel through the AWS API, but everything's in plain text and I can copy all these things out. So even if your Git project, your other Git projects were private, well, your Git project in S3 isn't. So now I'm going to copy off your project, do really, really cool things. And at the end of that, I'm going to go ahead and be really, really mean. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove your bucket. So now bucket's gone. Hopefully that wasn't your only backup. Hopefully. But again, this isn't to scare you. It's just to show how quickly that I can move from exposed access keys on the internet. I can go ahead and set up those keys, do quick enumeration to find out which services I may have access to, and then pivot to other services that I might have access to in order to go ahead and abuse them, in order to copy data, manipulate data, create resources, or in this case, wipe out resources because S3 is not recoverable. You can't recover it once it's deleted. So if I'm bad and I'm really not happy with you today, I just deleted your data forever. So let's go and look at some things. I don't know, Brian, where can we look to identify what I just did?
Well, we got logs, right?
I don't know, do we?
I hope so.
What kind of logs do you think we got?
How about CloudTrail?
CloudTrail would be awesome. Next slide, please. So if we're looking at our primary log sources, that one. Perfect, thanks. All right, so if we're looking at our primary log sources, we have CloudTrail, and we have CloudWatch. Those are our two primaries. We have a lot of other logs as well, but when we're looking at CloudTrail and CloudWatch, think of CloudTrail as this is how I'm interacting with the services. When I'm interacting with S3, when I'm interacting with EC2, Lightsail, RDS, Athena, this is what CloudTrail captures. It captures the interaction with the service itself. Well, I just deleted a bunch of stuff, right? That's not going to be in CloudTrail. By default, S3 object level logging event logs are not enabled. And the reason for that is to help you as the customer keep your bill down. So that way you're not recording all these events for everything unless you want them recorded. So that option is available, but by default, CloudTrail does not capture those data events. So all I can see right now, if we go into CloudTrail, is I'll be able to look at CloudTrail, identify that an external public IP address was able to interact using legitimate access keys with the environment, and that the user that those access keys belong to went ahead and deleted a bucket. It's now gone forever. The other difference is when we're looking at CloudTrail event history, by default, you get 90 days. 90 days of magic that as soon as you set up your AWS account, you log into your account, from today back to up to 90 days, you have CloudTrail. CloudTrail's available, super cool. If you configure a CloudTrail trail, you get to extend that timeline even further up to the point of your storage, how long you want to store it for. When we're looking at CloudWatch, CloudWatch by default is up to 15 months. So a difference between that is your configurations, how you want to do your logging. Another difference is events in CloudTrail can take potentially between 5 and 15 minutes to arrive and show up. Whereas if you're using your CloudWatch logs, you're looking at traditionally 1 to 3 minutes. The other major difference is CloudTrail is looking at your API layer. Again, how am I interacting with the services? CloudWatch, on the other hand, is what are my services actually doing? What is my performance threshold? What is my memory utilization? What is my CPU utilization? What are my data transfer rates from my EC2 instances and my RDS databases? How many objects? How much space am I currently using? What are my trends over time? A lot of math. So if you want metrics and mathematical formulas, CloudWatch is your hero. If you want to figure out what users did what and when, CloudTrail is absolutely the one you look at. So there's not one all end all. All right, this is the log I need to look at. Well, I mentioned S3 data events, right? Next one. So there's other logs as well. Of course, we can't make this easy for you, but it really is, if you're not using a service, why would you want logs for that service? It doesn't make sense. All we're doing is increasing your bill by giving you a bunch of data that you're not going to use. So instead, you have CloudTrail, you have CloudWatch, and then there's other primary services as well, such as S3 data events that I mentioned earlier. We have VPC flow logs to capture your layer 3, layer 4 OSI model network traffic. That's really good in identifying IP addresses, ports, protocols. You have your Route 53 DNS logs in order, if you're using Route 53 for domain name service translation. You have container logs, EKS for your Kubernetes if you're using containers on top of any of your payloads or applications. There's the load balancer logs, and there are so many other log types out there. Now, lots of logs, lots of clicking, lots of doing. Our first open source project today, Assisted Log Enabler. If you don't know how to turn on a lot of these logs, or let's say that you configured these services, but you didn't initially turn on the logs and you're doing multiple accounts, multiple services, multiple things. Well, Assisted Log Enabler is a capability that we developed and open sourced, so that way you can walk through a interactive dialogue to identify, okay, what logs do you want to turn on and where do you want to turn them on at? So that way, instead of doing a bunch of button clicking through menus, through the management console, instead of trying to become an expert at command line interface, if you're a little weaker at that or you just need some assistance, well, here's an interactive dialogue that can help you enable those logs moving forward, so that way you have those log events to reference in the future. But that said, it's really, really cool that we have logs, but what are we going to do with those logs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And before we move on into what we're going to do with those logs, one other thing just to kind of mention about logs is guard duty, right? So guard duty is our intrusion detection kind of system that detects anomalous events. An interesting thing, so we see some customers will use, all these log sources, enable all these log sources individually, some, and just do that. Some will also just use guard duty and allow guard duty to monitor some of these directly. So guard duty does monitor VPC flow logs, DNS logs, a number of different log types for you, even if they're not actually enabled. And then of course, our preferred and recommended option is having the logs enabled and having guard duty. But obviously it depends on your use case and what works for your company. But as to what do we do with those logs, right? That's where playbooks and processes come in. So next up, we're going to just talk about preparation for your incident response. And playbooks and processes is kind of that documentation for how you're going to prepare yourself to respond to a potential security event. And I think Jason, who's our tech ops lead, chose me for this topic because I am not always the best at being a good documentation person.
No, you're great at documentation.
Yeah. Just I need a lot of prodding, right?
Sharing it.
The truth is, though, good documentation, good playbooks is critical. And the reason why is you've got really smart people like Jason who maybe they see a security event, an S3 data deletion, everything's gone. He knows exactly what to do. He knows the right data sources to go look. He knows the queries. He knows how to restore from our backups. And then you got me. I don't know any of that, right? And so I'm fumbling around. I'm going to take 3 times as long. He's off in Hawaii having a good time. That's where playbooks processes are really going to allow you to scale, right? So talking about playbooks and processes, there's kind of 2 parts, right? You've got your larger security incident response plan. I'm not going to talk too much to that today. That's going to be your, roles, responsibilities, your general who perhaps is the lead on the technical response, who's the lead on your business response. We're not going to go so much into that today. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your playbooks and those specific processes because these are really important. So first, we do have a couple more open source projects that we've shared where we've created some example playbooks to give you something to start to work with, right? So how to respond to, say, an S3 ransomware, or how to respond to a data destruction or an IAM compromise. These aren't going to be perfect. They're not going to exactly match your customer, your internal workflows. You're going to have to work with them, but it's at least a start. I highly recommend checking those out. But from there, how do you develop more? Well, our recommendation is focus on your business. What's critical for you? First of all, remember there's certain things that are going to be always critical to everybody, right? Like IAM, everybody's going to have to use IAM. So please have some IAM playbooks. A compromised access key or a compromised user, you need to understand how to respond to that. But then, if you don't use S3, don't bother spending time writing S3 playbooks. Work on the things that you're actually going to be using. And then, so first, prioritize based on your business. Second, prioritize based on what you're seeing trends. So whether it's your help desk, your incident response team are getting this kind of incident, let's spend time there, or you're seeing, hey, everybody in the news, I went to Inforce and there were 15 talks about ransomware. Maybe ransomware is on the rise. Let's build some ransomware playbooks. Whatever it is, but that's kind of our recommendation. I highly recommend just starting. That's the most important part. Start. It may not be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. That's okay. We're going to talk about this later. We're going to practice. We're going to simulate. We're going to iterate. But starting, getting something out there is better than nothing. And then finally, test, right? Because again, if you haven't tested it, and I wrote this document up a year ago, this is how our organization worked at the time. Well, we changed our, password management system, and then meanwhile, and those instructions no longer made sense. And, the inventory system we use is now over here and not there. And again, you're going to just waste time. So start simple, test, iterate. That's really what it comes down to on the playbooks and processes. And with that, moving forward, again, playbooks and processes are kind of helping us understand how we're going to respond to a potential security event, right? But part of being able to effectively respond is having good visibility. If you're in a fog of war, you don't know what you had, you don't know where you're going, you're not going to be able to effectively respond. So we always want to make sure we talk about asset inventory just a little bit. So I'm just going to show a couple of brief examples to talk about inventory. So inventory, again, we're kind of focusing in this case on S3 just because that's the case study. But what's important to remember is for different services, you're going to want to have different levels of insight, right? So for S3, AWS config is going to be one option. There's other options as well, partners and the like, but AWS config is going to give you a certain level of insight. S3 inventory is going to give you another level of insight into your data and your usage of that service. And that's going to be very similar for other services. So just to do a quick walkthrough, I'm going to actually start with config. So if you're not familiar with config, config is one of our services. It can do a lot of things. It can evaluate compliance of resources, but at its heart, config is a configuration recorder. So it supports a number of AWS services, and it kind of keeps an eye on those services. It monitors them for changes. It says, you know, this is the state of that resource at this time, and here it changed, et cetera. And, you know, it can evaluate rules and things like that. But for this purpose, I just wanted to kind of talk about it at the basic, about configuration recording, right? So you can see in this account, it's a demo account. We've got, you know, some various resources set up. We've got S3, we've got EC2, RDS. It's going to store snapshots of the configurations of those items to let you understand what's in your account. And kind of drilling into that a little bit, this would be the S3 bucket that we were looking at just a minute ago. And this is just to give you an idea of what's in config. So config is at that high level, storing information about that resource. So it's going to store information about the policy, the bucket policy, ACLs, you know, is versioning enabled, things like that. What it's not going to store is information about the objects stored within that S3 bucket. The resource timeline within config is really cool. So you can see rule compliance here. That's, again, that evaluation part, which we're not really talking about, but even the configuration diff here. So like at this point, there was a configuration change that I believe changed the encryption preferences. And you know, there's a CloudTrail event where that put bucket encryption, who performed it, information like that. This is really helpful. This is really nice for, depends on the resource, but like an IAM policy. When did that policy become more permissive? When did that bucket policy become too permissive? Did someone make my bucket policy public? Something like that. This is going to really help give you that insight into that and help you effectively respond. But again, it's a high level. It doesn't tell us what was in there. And I wish I could tell you how many times that we've had customers come to us and say, hey, this bucket's gone. I don't even know what was in the bucket. And that's a terrifying place to be, right? If you don't know where your data is or what your data was exactly, then how can you effectively respond? How can you effectively convey that to management to say, you know, this is a big deal, this is maybe not so big deal. So talking to that a little bit, S3 inventory. So this is just a bucket that we have with some random files in it.
But very important files.
Very important files. My apologies. Thank you, Jason.
Those are my very important files.
So enabling S3 inventory is really simple. It's just under the management tab within the S3 bucket. You go down and you create an inventory configuration. All this is really doing is creating a batch job that runs in the background that lists out the objects in your S3 bucket and stores them somewhere. So you can configure it in various ways, but ultimately it comes down to, hey, put this data, this inventory data somewhere, and run so often. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, nothing too complicated. What it will do though is give you that ability to look back. And so the data that comes out just goes to an S3 bucket. Nothing.
Data. There you go.
And it's just going to produce a CSV file per run. Nothing complicated. I pulled one of these up in Excel. Obviously, this is very simple, but it's going to give you just basic object information. Still, this is going to allow you to understand a bit more impact. You're not going to know what the contents of your files are, but at least hey, I had these files were that big, this is when they were created, etc. You can now at least understand the impact.
Now, what's one of the downsides that we discovered with our S3 inventory, though?
So one downside is just there's some initial lag when you create it. It can take up to 48 hours after creating it to first run and show up. So that's one thing to just kind of keep in mind. Anything else that
No, that was the big one, is just it's not an instant thing.
Yeah.
So if you don't have an existing inventory, it's better to do this sooner rather than later, because it does take some time. It's looking for the diffs, it's looking for those new objects. It's just going to take time to do the inventory because of the background back job. So sooner is always better when it comes to logs.
Yeah.
I may be a little biased, but
and so, but again, important thing here is this isn't like, hey, you need to go do S3 inventory. You should use S3 inventory or something similar if that's a service that you're using, but consider what services you're using and make sure you have adequate visibility is really what I'm advocating for here. So if you're using EC2, for instance, do you have insight into what's running on your instances? Do you have package listings or software asset management? You have to adapt your strategy to your resource. And so just something to keep in mind there. With that said, I'm going to flip back to Jason and let us talk a little bit.
Again?
Yes, unfortunately, it is your turn again already.
Okay. All right. So we talked about so far at the beginning. Cool. Here's what bad looks like. Here's some good things that look like. Let's go and do our logs. Let's go and do our asset inventory. Really super cool. But it's really wonderful that I have logs. It's really wonderful that I knew what was destroyed. But how do I keep it from being deleted or damaged either maliciously or non-maliciously? Again, our junior developer may have made a mistake. We'll go talk to him after the episode and we'll identify a root cause of what actually occurred. Poor Oliver. He's a good dog. He's a good boy. But when we're looking at it, what are some steps that we can take in order to prevent this to begin with? Well, when we're looking at data protection for S3, again, our use case, we want to revolve around that central messaging. There are several different things that are not enabled by default, but you have the option to enable. The first one being multi-factor authentication delete. Keynote, MFA delete can only be enabled by root. So the root user has to turn on MFA delete for the bucket. But the good thing is now you're requiring MFA delete. So you can write, you can add, you can create a whole bunch of things, but you can't get rid of anything without having that two-factor authentication in order to actually delete objects. In this case, where Oliver went in with the access key, went ahead and just did a remove bucket, force everything gone, well, that would have failed immediately because Oliver, whoever had that access key, would not have had access to the second authentication mechanism. So that attack would have been stopped right there. MFA is, it's not difficult to set up. It is a little time consuming, but once it's set up, it offers an insurmountable level of protection. Additionally, backups. We've had several ransomware discussions throughout yesterday and today. We're always harping on backups is, well, what if S3 is my backup? It may be your backup, but sometimes it's good to have a backup for a backup. If S3 is your backup, then I'll talk about the other two options here in a moment. But if you're just storing like a simple web server or data, or you're just using it as a storage mechanism, AWS backup may be an option for you to do continuous or periodic backups. Continuous backups will allow you to do point-in-time restoral of that S3 bucket to any time it was within the last 35 days. So if you discover something happened 14 days ago, cool, 14 is less than 35. AWS Backup can help you recover that data. If you don't have AWS Backup enabled, S3 is not recoverable natively. Natively, S3 is not recoverable. So you need a backup solution of some form or fashion or a copy of those files. And this is one option that's available to y'all. If S3 is my backups, for example, well, what I can do is object lock. In object lock is where I'm setting up a policy saying, all right, this object now exists. Nobody can do anything with it for X period of time. That's really great for, let's say, index.html for a static website. Or if you're doing patch releases for your software, if you know your release cycle is every 3 months, well, why not set up a policy that this object is locked for the next 3 months, can't be deleted, can't be modified, can't be overwritten, so that way your release is good until your next release. You delete the old one, archive the old one, put the new one in, object lock it, and you're good for that next period of time. Well, what if we need to keep stuff even longer, days or years? Or I need to prevent early deletions by anybody, including root. Well, we have AWS Backup Vault Lock. Unlike object lock, where root can go in and change the policy that applies to that object, if you do a vault lock, it is in code. A human being cannot change that vault. So once you set up the vault, once you set up the policy, and once it's applied, you have the initial 72 hours after you create the vault in order to make any changes you want. After that, it's like pouring concrete. That object is going to align to that policy for that time frame, and nobody can change it. Root can't, IAM users can't, administrators can't, AWS can't. That it is written in stone at that point. So it all depends on what you're trying to do with your different objects. But these are different options specifically for S3, where I don't want this object to go away for whatever reason for this period of time. Well, we have several different options that are available based on our bucket configurations. Well, it's really cool that we have data. Really wonderful that we have data. We talked about logs. We're talking about protecting our stuff. But what do we actually do with the logs? I have CloudTrail, I have CloudWatch, I have S3 data events, I have insert service, append it with log here. Well, you need an analysis environment. If I go through and I clicky on the, yes, I said clicky, and I clicky on CloudTrail and I go into my event history and I look at my last 90 days, well, super cool. I can only really look at one event at a time. Well, if I'm trying to find out a user that deleted 119 objects from an S3 bucket, and I do have S3 data events, one object at a time, that's a lot of clicks. So having an analysis environment, and that takes a lot of time as well. So how do we make it faster? How do we make it easier? And how do we make it more repeatable framework so that way the next analyst, the next user is doing the same thing without changing that standard or that policy? Well, you need an analysis environment built. So one option that we do have, and if you watch our AWS On Air episode or our Twitch series, we've gone over this several times as well, that you can go ahead and look up our Twitch episodes. And we have AWS Security Analytics bootstrapped using AWS Amazon Athena. The reason we choose Athena, well, it's a native service. Does it have to be Athena? No. It could be whatever ETL or whatever a log aggregation, log analysis, if you're using one of our partners. Whatever it is, as long as you have an analysis environment that's ready and you can spin up when you need it, that's what we're driving towards. The ability to actually put something on top of your logs to be able to analyze them as fast as possible, identify what the root cause was, contain that event, eradicate whatever caused that event, and get back to business as fast as possible, because time is money, but time is also trust. And we want to make sure that we sustain as much trust as possible with our customers by helping them consolidate or reduce the timeline to respond to their events. And Athena Analytics Bootstrap, another open source project, does exactly that. Right now it's configured for CloudTrail, VPC Flow logs, and Route 53 logs. We do have enhancements for S3 data events, WAF, and a couple other services that are coming in the near future. So that way, as you enable this log data, if you choose to use different options, this is an option that's available to you. So we gathered our logs, right? But do I want to wait for something to happen to start looking at my logs?
That might not be your best option.
Well, what do I do about an attack? Like, if the internet's such a bad place, I'm telling everyone the internet's such a bad place. How do I show what the bad thing is before it actually happens?
Ah, good idea. How about we simulate it?
I like that. I like that answer.
Yeah. Okay. So I got take that as my cue, I guess.
I think that is your cue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I tried to play it off, but
Yeah.
it didn't work too well. We try.
So simulating, this is actually, I really enjoy this part of it. Just I've worked as a pen tester for quite a while, so this part's fun, and it should be fun. The idea here is to practice, right? Let's see what sort of indicators a security event might give us in reality. Let's make sure we have the appropriate log sources. Let's make sure our processes are actually working. Make sure that we know how to go from end to end. And so that's really what simulation is about, right? There's a couple of tools linked here. So AWS Cloud Saga is something that our team has worked on that helps simulate a few scenarios. The fault injection simulator is something that's a whole different end of the spectrum where you can really kind of get into like chaos engineering and like, injecting specific events at specific times. Very complicated.
Now, that doesn't affect their billing though, right? Does it actually create resources?
It depends on how you set it up, right? So FIS is very capable. It's got a lot of things you can do. So it just depends on how you're using it. But you don't have to be overly complicated with the simulation. What Jason did here earlier, running through using an access key, that was a simulation. It was a pretty basic one. I mean, you probably could have made it a little more complicated for them, Jason, but it's all right. But it was still a good simulation because, well, hey, we've got logs from that, right? We saw them try to create a user, list a user. That's typical things that you're going to see for an attacker. There's going to be denies. They're going to try to use various services. Maybe they're going to list S3, they're going to list EC2, they're going to list RDS, there's going to be a bunch of denies, there's going to be a bunch of enumeration. All of those are good indicators. It doesn't have to be a complicated simulation to be good. I do recommend trying to get it real enough that it engages everyone, right? So you do want engagement, because otherwise, if you're just kind of, if you're not really paying attention to it, if you're not, it's not going to be taken seriously. You're not going to follow through all your steps. You're not going to actually get the lessons. So it is important to try to get everyone committed to it. It's really important, in my opinion, to engage different parts of your organization. Find, the person who does like breaking things. Find, one of your blue teamers who likes to be on the other end. Pull in different people. Don't pull in the same people every time. Maybe we know Jason's just a perfect responder and he does everything right, but Bob over there, he's still a little bit newer and he doesn't always follow the process or whatever. So pulling in different people is going to be valuable. Having a little bit of randomness is valuable. So if Bob knows the exact scenario that you're going to play out, it's not a good test, right? Like let's not tell Bob everything. Let's have some randomness, some secrets.
And we only want our techies, right? The
Oh,
folks
of
that are
course.
actually on keyboard.
No, we actually do want to include people from out the organization, right? So if they're part of your incident response plan, you probably should involve them.
But that makes it so painful.
Well, again, it depends on what the goal of simulation is. Sometimes you can do
Sure.
a little smaller techie ones, but you probably want a full end-to-end test at some point where it really involves everybody.
Next, you're going to say legal.
Yeah, legal should probably be involved occasionally, at least once a year. All right, that wasn't recorded, so it's okay. Anyway, so simulation, it should be fun. It's very important, and the reason it's so important is the next step, which is iterate, right? So you have to take those run books, those playbooks that we defined earlier. They weren't going to be perfect. We said they weren't going to be perfect. Simulate is where we show that they weren't perfect. That's going to show the missing steps, and that's going to show where we can fix them. So that's one part of iteration, is that we're going to do improvements to our documentation, our processes. The other part of iteration is automation. It highlights the opportunities for us to better automate certain activities to enhance our incident response. So things that we can do to perhaps automatically respond. This is just an example. This is not S3 related, but this is kind of a canonical example of a automation for a web application attack. So say someone is slamming us with SQL injection, OWASP attacks, who knows, right? Our WAF can detect that. We can see that increased activity. We can feed it through a pipeline and update a rule set and block them. Easy peasy. That's a good example of an automation that we might take to protect our web application stack. This could be a variety of things, and it doesn't have to be, terribly complicated. It could be something like, it could also be something like, we need a better break glass mechanism. So everything was going perfectly. Bob was following steps A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, until step 6 when he's supposed to go and say, disable an access key. Well, Bob doesn't have that permission. Who has that permission? Jason. Jason's off playing
Call of Duty.
Counter-Strike, Call of Duty,
Well,
something,
yeah.
I don't know.
There's
He's
no other
not
games.
listening to his pager and I can't get a hold of him. Now my response is an hour later before I can finally get a hold of him, stop his game and get his help. That's an opportunity for a break glass, right? So this is why simulation is important. It's really important to just practice. And really that goes into something we're always talking about at AWS, which is flywheels or loops, feedback loops, right? And so I'm going to let Jason speak a little bit more to this.
Yeah, because always remember, it's better to fail fast and fail hard. Failing slow is dying slow. If you're going to fail, do it through a simulation, do it through iteration before a security event when it actually matters. If you're doing your annual drills, your quarterly exercises, your training with your responders, things like that, you want to make sure they can fail up front so you can identify those deficiencies, simulate and iterate. Well, if we look at a flywheel, everything in security is a circle. I know there's probably flat earthers out there. I have a slightly differing opinion, but that's okay. Everyone has their opinions, but in this case, my opinion is security is a flywheel. So what we're going to look at is, how do I prepare before something happens? What are my people, processes, and technologies, my policies and procedures that are available to me to assess and identify different things before I give them the opportunity to occur? S3, do we use public repositories, and is there an opportunity for our junior developers to actually copy out their access keys to a public repository? If that is a scenario that might be applicable to your organization, that may be something you want to look at to try and address before you give it the opportunity to occur. For example, maybe instead of using access keys, we use roles and we use AWS Secrets Manager. So that way there are no keys outside of the AWS environment and they're all encrypted, and the developers actually can't read the keys, only the applications can. Another thing is, once you set things up, how am I looking at them? It's really great to have all the logs in the world. I have terabytes, I have petabytes of logs, but who's looking at them? And this doesn't have to be a person. This could be a person or a technology. A lot of times we use Lambda, we use automation, we use Fargate, we use a lot of serverless technologies to go ahead and look through our log data because humans are fallible. But you need someone or something looking at that data to assess and identify, are the things I'm looking for occurring? Are the things I'm not looking for able to be seen? Then once you find those logs, how do I analyze it? How do I actually look at those events? I have all these log data, I have all these things, but how do I actually look at multiple events at once to identify a trend? I saw a bunch of objects deleted. Okay, well, crud. What happened before that? Well, before that, there was an access to the bucket. Before that, there was a list users call. And before that, there was an attempt to do create users with an access key of my junior developer. So walking all the way back to the root cause of what actually occurred at the beginning, rather than just seeing, all right, here's the thing that happened. Well, what happened before, what happened after? What's the entire story? And how do we document that story? And this is where simulation and iteration comes in. Based on the story and based on what we learn, how can I simulate that in the future? Because if we see this thing or we think this thing is going to occur, how do I pretend or simulate that in my environment so that way we can practice against it before a real world event does occur? And then how do I iterate? How do I turn that into automation in order to experience cost savings, return on investment, opportunity for growth? And how do I make my automation and my processes that much stronger so that way that really, really evil internet will someday just maybe leave me alone a little bit more. So it is a flywheel because as we simulate and iterate, well, guess what? We have to update our documentation based on updates to our documentation. We need to test that documentation. We also may find new things that we learned about. Oh, by the way, we're using a new service. Well, guess what? Start the flywheel for the service because your incident response simulation from last year isn't going to apply because it doesn't include that new capability that you've migrated to. So it really is a flywheel for how do I prepare before something occurs? How do I monitor to identify if things are occurring? How do I analyze and respond to those events? And then how do I simulate and iterate them so that way we can test it and be ready in the instance that that event does occur? So we also have some additional resources. I know we've talked about a lot today and really appreciate everyone's patience and attention. Love y'all, really appreciate it. So you can go ahead and see more. We do have an AWS CIRT Twitch stream. It was on Wednesdays. It's gotten moved to Fridays just to aid in time zone things, work schedules, things like that. But we do talk about security issues on a repeating basis where about an hour every other week, we'll identify a trend that we're seeing or we'll rehash an old trend such as exposed access keys. Please don't do it. And then we've also talked about S3 security and access management. We have really focused on S3 just because it's one of our more widely used services. It's one of our oldest services, but there's also risky configuration with that service based on how you're using it. And it all depends on how secure you need that data and different options available to you based on how you're using the service for your individual business needs. We saw assisted log enabler. How do I turn on logs if I'm not quite sure or if it's just too much for me? If I have 1,000 accounts and I'm trying to turn on individual service logs for each of those accounts, how can I iterate a mechanism or software or a project in order to turn on some of those things and help guide me through it to make it that much easier? We talked about playbook templates. If you don't have a playbook for something, we threw up some samples there. Are they the best in the world? No. No. Uh, but they're at least a starting point. I would say they're not the best in the world because I wrote most of them. But so they're at least a starting point for a lot of trends, a lot of things that we've seen customers experience. So ransomware, IAM access key exposure, IMDS v1 abuse through SSRF, server-side request forgeries, different things that we've seen, cryptojacking, blockchain manipulation, some things that we've seen that we've started looking at. All right, how do I search through CloudTrail? What are things I'm looking for? How can I look at CloudWatch? How can I implement Lambda functions? How can I go ahead and prevent this thing before it occurs to me? And that's what we're trying to express through some of those playbooks. We talked about Security Analytics Bootstrap. We looked a little bit at Fault Injection Simulator and Cloud Saga so that way you can simulate events with technical events that will actually show up in your logs. So that way you'll have logs to look at based on your simulations. We looked at Backup Vault. And finally, our AWS Security Incident Response Guide. It is good right now. I will tell you that we're currently undergoing a revision to it and hoping to have the new update posted by Reinforce later this year. Or I'm sorry, Reinvent later this year. That we are looking end of year to have a full-fledged update to that because we're diving a lot deeper. We're understanding, getting everyone's feedback from our customers. There are a lot of pain points with the existing document we identified. So the new document we're hoping will be a lot more friendly, a lot more usable, and have a lot more really cool things inside of it for everyone to use. Additionally, a couple of these talks are going to occur. Most of them have already occurred, but please feel free to access the recordings. Please feel free to reach out to the authors of those based on the AWS Events app, reaching out to those points of contact. But there are several other events for incident response, ransomware, data protection. Again, at the end of the day, security is our priority, and we want to make sure our customers are as secure and well off as possible. With that said, thank you very, very much. I am Jason Hurst.
Brian Poole. And the CIRT Twitch stream that was mentioned earlier, again, just going to plug that because it's a really cool opportunity for customers. If you do have questions that you want to talk about, we'll have a little bit of time here, but You can also always reach us via the Twitch stream while we're streaming. Our team actively participates. It's a great thing. Sorry.
Just be aware, we are a little punny. So you will find a lot of puns in the chat, but we love to engage with our customers in real time. And that's why we like Twitch as a platform, because it allows us to chat with you as our presenters are actually presenting their content. So
Yeah.
hopefully a lot of fun. But thank you everyone for coming out. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Survey.
And finally, reminder, please complete the session survey. They will yell at us, admonish us greatly if you don't. So we do appreciate it. Thank you.